Hello to everyone here in our group, realspirituality.net. September 1st, 2021. I woke up this morning to, it's not going to be an easy one, meaning doing this live stream. No matter how I approached it, no matter how the suggestions I may have made, it was always the same, spoils of war. And so this is interesting. What he would have me share, it's not easy. Um, a few months ago, he had in the spirit, the Father had me, said he had a surprise for me. And in this was a big treasure chest. And of course, I had the key to open it. He said it was mine. And so, of course, I was wondering what was inside of it. And when I opened it, I was stunned. To say the least, I was stunned. There were things, these were treasures. So many different treasures that were found in darkness, brought into the kingdom of light. And as I mentioned last week and the week before, I went years embarrassed to even mention that as a teenager, I had dabbled and practiced white magic. And there were reasons. And even going to church, when I did first start going to church, I didn't say anything to the pastor for the longest time. I finally told him in 1995. And I asked him, do you realize why I didn't tell you? And it was because in telling anyone, especially in the church, they would have immediately gone into a demon behind every bush mode. And this is what I told them. And in so doing, they would have missed what the Lord was doing, the workmanship of the Father's hand in my life. And he agreed. He would have missed it. He would have missed it going into a demon behind every bush mode. And it's interesting, the things that I've seen go on in the church, people thinking everything is demonic. And, then we miss the very workmanship of the Father's hand. And in going through this treasure chest, it just surprised me. When I was a teenager at the time, when he clearly and audibly told me, don't anxiously run off with what you want to believe, but rather be patient for what you need to know. And in that, he did spare me. He stopped me from going through an initiation. And of course, the question comes up, and it did come up at the time. Why did I get involved in that to begin with? And it was to learn how to use my spiritual gifts, the gifts that I knew I had in my spirit. That is not taught in the church. Those things aren't even mentioned. They're all written off as being demonic. And so in stopping me from the initiation, I did get rid of all the paraphernalia that went with it. But one thing I'm going to say, people need to realize, from the beginning, in the book of Genesis, from the beginning, God said, let there be light, and light was. Let there be. God said, and it was. God said, and it was. Not only is there power in his words, but there are power in ours. And one thing I did learn in witchcraft, in the white magic, you get your little spell books and think you're learning how to use your gifts, and that big tagline that captures people still used to this day. And I would encourage anyone, please take note of this, for the betterment of mankind, to always think that in using your gifts, it is for the betterment of mankind, but in pursuing it in the ways of darkness is to take you away from the Father of Lights, the very person you need to hook up with. And so in dabbling, and I'm going to make this brief, but in dabbling, I thought I would try a love spell, and not on a person. I wanted to see what it would do, what would happen. And so I did get my sister's cat sitting outside, and I did this love spell. He arched up his back and hissed and clawed, and you could, there were demons that were put into that cat, and he tore off into the woods. And of course, I felt horrible. My sister was looking for her cat for the next week. And there was a neighbor that said, oh, she saw him. He was rabied. He's somewhere off in the woods, probably dead by now. He just, he acted like he had rabies. You know, and here we go with the power of words. What some people may think is a love spell, it's releasing demonic activity. And yet, here we have the Bible, his words, always his words. And when we speak his words, it releases angelic activity. We need to keep that in mind, to release the activity in the light. And so, like I said, he told me this was not going to be an easy one. And so I am in question of what else he would have me share. In going through this treasure chest, it was all those things not only found in darkness, but learning to overcome those areas of darkness in my own life, and to do so with the Father of lights. There is a proverb that says, trust him with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And as a teenager, I was leaning on my own understanding, wanting to believe this was all good because it was white, to think that it was of God because it was white magic, not black. But it was still all witchcraft. One thing through the years, and I did question, I always question, why did you allow me to go in there if it wasn't you? And I do marvel to this day, now that he's had me go through this treasure chest, those things left in darkness to be brought into the kingdom of light. There is a story of King David in the Old Testament. He was anointed as being king, but at the time, the first king of Israel, Saul, he was in that position as king, but he was no longer anointed to be king. David was anointed to be king. He was waiting to step into that office. He was waiting for his cue. And until that happened, King Saul, he sought to kill King David and his men. And at one point, they went to go into a village that was with Saul's men to overcome. And as they were on their way, some of David's men, they were so tired they just couldn't go on another inch. But here we go with King David is the covenant of the sure mercies. Covenant of the sure mercies of David. And in doing, he told his men that were too tired to go on. They fought valiantly with him up to that time. He knew they were good warriors. They just didn't have it in them to keep going. He told them to rest up. Here we have the mercy seat, rest up. Told them to rest up and that they would be back. They went into that village, him and the other men that still had it in them to do. They went into that village and overcame Saul's men. And they came back with the spoils of war. But they came back to these men that were too tired to just go on another inch. And he shared it with those men because they had been in that fight that whole time. In terms of going through the things in the treasure chest, it is to touch on spiritual warfare. Our fight is not with flesh and blood, but it is with powers and principalities in spiritual high places. And in that is to learn to become aware. Here we go, aware, not just mindful, but aware that there is a spiritual warfare going on within ourselves. And we don't realize that until we come to learn more. and it could be with the spoils of war. But in that war that rages within ourselves, I mentioned the people that I saw, the company of people in the valley of darkness, being mindful. you know, they weren't being mindful into the Father's ways and thoughts. They were being mindful to stay positive. And yet they were stuck in this ravine with a rock slide, and they lost all interest to find their way out. They had no interest. Not only did they lose their way, they forgot their way. And one of the items in this treasure chest that he gave me was that veil of ignorance. And until we overcome the darkness even within our own mind, we don't realize how much we are in that darkness, or to even lose interest in overcoming that darkness, or knowing how in the kingdom of light it is to keep pressing forward. And in that, he would also have me bring up, certainly don't mean to sound scattered, but there is something else he also wanted me to bring up, because a lot of people around me didn't know what I was doing. As far as the spiritual aspects. And here we go with judging based on appearances, in thinking I was beneath them when amount to much wasn't considered an equal in terms of a whole body, the wholeness, judging by appearances. And unfortunately, today we have a lot of judging by appearances, those looking good. And yet it's not so good. Not so good. In fact, with the world being turned inside out, anything that was good for this country, anything that protected the rights of we the people, were written off with an executive order. Anything with Trump's name on it, even if it meant selling out this country. And there's a reason I say that, because here we go with spiritual warfare. And until we overcome that darkness, even within our own lives, we won't recognize it in the world. And there is I didn't want to say that, a systemic genocide. I really didn't want to say that. But this is what's happening with that darkness. So many people renting their headspace to the darkness. And I do realize there are some people leaving Facebook, but I've noticed a few dropping off the membership in this group. And there may be some, they're leaving Facebook, but then they're looking for another camp, someone else that will tickle their ear. Not everything's going to tickle our ear. Like I said, I woke up this morning to, it's not going to be an easy one, meaning this live stream. And I would much rather be told the truth than what I want to hear, And so in that was to ask them help to make it easier. So, and today is September 1st. It's been a year ago today, that we got news about my daughter. And it's been a very interesting year. Not other, the others, I'm thinking my son, grandkids, not all have had an easy time dealing with that. And to take that comfort, and here we go, telling us what we need to hear, not necessarily or telling us what we need to know, not necessarily what we want to hear. And we need to hear that she's in the Father's hands. That gives us comfort. But unfortunately, in the human side, here we go with the spiritual warfare, renting our space, even to grief. We need to be careful and not to be drugged down by those things, but to continue on in the journey. We didn't get this far to give up now. And so it has always been to encourage others. In time, we will meet up again, and to have comfort in that. But here we go with the spoils of war. He has encouraged me greatly in the last few months to embrace my life And I think of all the trials, the tribulations, the challenges. And here we go, looking in the treasure chest of the spoils of war, overcoming that darkness, despite how it seemed at the time. It was to trust him with all my heart and to not lean on my own understanding, despite what we think it should be. Even doing these live streams, he told me from the beginning that he would have me bring up things others wouldn't because it's too personal and up close. And to speak on things that others, here we go, think I shouldn't, including myself. And that has happened. It is to not lean on our own understanding, go as he leads us. And it's not always in the way we think it should be, but it will always be in the way it needs to. So on that, being quiet for a moment, wasn't easy to bring these things up, not even as a teenager. Those things embarrassed me. And like I said, even the hook that's being used today, tactics of the enemy, same thing, for the betterment of mankind. And yet to trust the Father of lights, even when we don't understand. It is always, if we trust him and go as he leads us, it will always be for the highest good of all involved. He knows. He knows. And to be careful with our words, to speak kindly to one another, and not to put those unkind words, the rusty swords, hitting other people. Hurt people hurt people. And we need to be aware of those things. And it's to just keep on keeping on, even when we don't understand. He just reminded me of something else he did want me to bring up, you know, concerning, how can I say this? Not understanding, not always going with our own understanding. There are things he has told me, here we go, to embrace my life in him, but to embrace my life in him wholeheartedly. He is my life and wouldn't have made it through without him. At the same time, he has encouraged me to get my affairs in order, which to me means the pilot program. My concerns are for future generations. We have parents today that are so into their feelings instead of teaching their kids tools on how to live. They are our future, and not to swallow everything hook, line, and sinker, but to use that spiritual discernment. And so he would have me bring things up that have not been taught, but it's by firsthand experience, by his leading, by his spoken word. And yes, with that balance in the scriptural soundness, by his written word and his word in the flesh, Christ Jesus, chief cornerstone, firstborn from the dead, son of fire, and so in that is to bring up things that have not been taught. The corporate body has been left weak, taught and conditioned to deny the very things they need, and use tools that no are not demonic. But it's up to us to be willing to learn how they function and operate in the kingdom of darkness. And so on that note, I would just have everyone stop and consider, if you had your treasure chest, if you could look inside your treasure chest, what would be in your spoils of war? What have you overcome? We are made to be victors in light, not victims in darkness. And to bring those treasures we find in darkness, bring them into the kingdom of light where they belong, as they were divinely designed to be, to begin with. So on that note, I hope everyone's having a great day. We're about over with summer, and it's just been gorgeous out here. And just be willing to do your inner work, no matter what's going on the outside. One thing he told me when the news came on my daughter, he did let me know, the more we're focused on taking care of things on the outside, the more energy it's going to take to do that inner work. And so my focus was first to take care of that inner work. And then by the time we did the service for my daughter, I was all ready to take care of things on the outside. And it just flowed so nicely. So on that, hope you have a great day, great rest of the week, and as always, healing and health in the name of Jesus, his miracle working power, all authority that is in his name. And all of it is. And so on that note, I'll catch you next week. Have a good one.